someone actually wrote to me on Twitter. It's amazing because nobody ever writes to me on Twitter, or very few people ever write to me or interact with me on Twitter. And that is because Twitter is not a place that I have really managed to break into very well. I haven't seemed to make a lot of connections on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter and you would like to interact with me, I would really appreciate that. My Twitter handle there is @TimothyFrisch. So please connect with me on Twitter if you use that social media platform. But thank you to Steve from Claiming Christianity. He has a YouTube channel, and I encourage you to check out his YouTube channel. He does different Bible reviews and things. And he wrote to me on Twitter saying, "Okay, Tim, I'm going to ask, what are your top 3 everyday carry Bibles and top 3 everyday use Bibles? I got to know." So because he actually took the time to write to me on Twitter, I thought that deserved at least one video. So I'm going to respond actually with one video here on the top 3 everyday carry Bibles. And then I plan to do another video at some point on the top 3 everyday use Bibles. Now, when it comes to talking about everyday carry Bibles, I do want to say, first of all, that the Bibles I'm going to talk about here are just representative of the kinds of Bibles that I think are really good. They're not necessarily the Bibles that I do carry around all the time because I use a lot of different Bibles. I'm not really consistent about which Bible I'm using at any given time. But I think that these Bibles are really good examples of the kinds of Bibles I would say are the top Bibles for everyday carry, in my opinion. And this is just an opinion. Some people, for example, like really small Bibles to carry around, like a compact size. And I'm not going to be highlighting any compact Bibles because I like something that is still big enough to where the font is a good size, but small enough that you can carry it around easily. And so these are carry Bibles. I do want to emphasize these aren't necessarily the top 3 Bibles overall. These are just Bibles that I would highly recommend for carrying places because they're easy to carry. They're pretty portable. And the first one that I'm going to highlight is the ESV large print Thinline. If you've watched my channel, you've seen me talk about this Bible and praise this Bible. And one of the reasons is it is that Goldilocks size that I've been talking about lately. It's kind of in that 8.5 by 5.5 inch range, which I think is really good. It's also a thin line, which is an added bonus for being easy for carry and holding. You can just hold this in your hand so easily, open it so easily. As you can see, very easy for taking places, for carrying. So I think this is a top choice, one of my top choices for everyday carry. It also has the advantage in this case of being a large print. And for this size Bible, it's not a huge print, but it is like a 10-point size font, which for this size Bible is actually quite good. I mean, that's a good size font for a thin line. Now, this is not a reference Bible. So if you get an ESV large print reference thin line, it is going to be a little bit bigger footprint, a little taller, maybe a little wider. But the ESV large print thin line non-reference edition is this size here, which I think is ideal for carry and still readable. But really any thin line Bible, I have a NASB thin line here, as you can see, really similar size in both of these Bibles. So I highly recommend a thin line Bible for carry. The only downside of the thin line Bibles is the paper can be quite thin, and so if ghosting really bothers you, you don't like to see words from the other side of the page, then that can be an issue with these kinds of Bibles. However, they've in recent years line matched these Bibles, so the ghosting isn't as much of an issue because the lines are all matched up on each page. So personally for me, I think this is one of the top Bibles that I would say is great for everyday carry, the ESV large print thin line. The second one that to me is kind of a standout Bible, And both of these that I'm talking about to begin with are actually not very expensive. You can get a imitation leather or even a genuine leather type cover at a pretty affordable price. But the second one is the CSB single column large print personal size Bible. So again, this is called large print. It is personal size, so it's in that kind of 8.5 by 5.5 inch range. I really like that footprint. I think it's just a nice medium-sized kind of Bible. Even though they call it personal size, that just means basically that you can hold it and carry it around very easily. But it's also a large print. In this case, it's a single column format. So I think that's a nice contrast to the Bible that I just pointed out. A lot of the Thinline Bibles are double column format. I like how Bibles like this give you a good size single column format. It is, again, a 10-point font. And the CSB font I find to be very readable. Again, this is line matched, so even though the paper is thin, the ghosting doesn't seem to be too much of an issue for this Bible. I would say it's actually even a little better as far as paper opacity than the ESV large print Thinline. But they're very similar overall, I would say, in terms of their readability. But this is a single column format, which is really nice. It is going to be a thicker Bible than the Thinline, but still great for carry. So again, this is just representative. There are other single column formats. You can get that in the New King James Version. They have a single column. I think that often is a reference Bible. This one is not a reference Bible. Personally, for everyday carry, I prefer something that's more focused on the biblical text than having a bunch of references in there, which can clutter up the text, but it also means they have less space on each page, so the font would tend to be a little bit smaller. So I like something that you can carry that doesn't have references so that you still have a good size font. But the Clarion from Cambridge is another single column format that does have references, and a lot of people really like that as well. Similar idea. This might even be a little bit bigger, I would say, than a Clarion, but I think it's not too big. It's still very easy to handle and carry around with you. And as I keep saying, still very readable. So that's another really good everyday carry Bible. And the last great everyday carry Bible that I'm going to highlight is a more expensive Bible because it's from Cambridge. It's the Cambridge Concord. This is the Bible that I have talked about recently as being just like one of those great all-round type Bibles, the Goldilocks size Bibles. I really do like this kind of a format. And Cambridge is going to come out with another Bible in this similar kind of a format and form factor called the Cambridge Diadem. That is due out later this year of 2021. So I'm really excited, and I wanted to highlight this Bible as being a really good everyday carry kind of a Bible. Again, it's in that similar footprint of 8.5, 5.5 range. I think a little smaller than that. It's actually still pretty thin, almost like a Thinline, although it's not advertised as a Thinline. It's not technically a Thinline. But as you can tell, you can hold this in your hand so easily. But when you get inside here, it is actually a reference Bible. So it has center column references. But the font on this is still a decent size. Now, in contrast to the other Bibles I was showing you, this is a premium quality Bible. So the paper opacity on this is just fantastic. It is a classic format. It's also the Concord only in the King James Version. The Diadem will be in other translations, but the Concord is only in the King James Version. So that's my only downside to this. It's a little limited in terms of your options for translation. Actually, it's very limited in terms of your options. But if you like the King James Version, this is one of the best formats, in my opinion, for everyday carry Bibles. What's great about all of these Bibles is that they're very easy to put into a bag that you can carry with you. Obviously, they're all very easy to hold in your hand, which to me is key with all of these Bibles. You don't have to put them on a desk. And even if you're speaking at a church or at a Bible study, they're the kind of Bible that you can hold easily in your hand as you do so. So thank you, Steve, from Claiming Christianity, for that awesome question. That's the first part in answer to the question that you asked about everyday carry Bibles. In an upcoming video, I will talk about everyday use Bibles. Those Bibles will be even larger, but I think when you're at your desk, in your study, in an office, there are other Bibles that I might recommend for everyday use Bibles. But the ESV large print Thinline, the CSB large print personal size single column, and the Cambridge Concord are my top 3 representative recommendations for everyday carry Bibles. I would love to hear in the comment section what other people have as their top everyday carry Bibles, what you recommend. I think this is a really interesting subject, and obviously we're going to have a lot of different opinions on it. So it would be interesting to hear what your opinions are. But thank you as always for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts and opinions brought to you from a Frisch Perspective.